The moment Genevieve Lambert's $1,000 heels hit the puddle, splashing muddy water up her silk stockings, she knew this day had officially become a disaster of epic proportions. Rain hammered down on the Seattle streets with the kind of violence that made people question their life choices, and Genevieve was definitely questioning hers. Her driver had dropped her off at the wrong address, her phone was dead, and she'd just left the most insufferable board meeting of her career. At 32, she'd built Lambert Technologies into an empire worth over $300 million. But right now, standing in a downpour that seemed biblical in its intensity, she felt as helpless as a child. The designer blazer that had cost more than most people's monthly rent was now plastered to her shoulders, and her carefully styled blonde hair hung in wet ropes around her face. She tried to flag down a taxi, but they all rushed past, already occupied or simply unwilling to stop in this weather. Her briefcase felt like it weighed 100 pounds, full of contracts and documents she couldn't afford to get soaked. "Miss, are you okay?" The voice cut through the sound of rain, and Genevieve turned to see a man emerging from a small coffee shop, a cheap black umbrella already extended over his head. He was tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders that filled out his worn denim jacket. His brown hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges, and his face had the kind of rugged features that belonged in a cologne commercial, though the concern in his hazel eyes was genuine. Without waiting for her answer, he stepped closer and held the umbrella over her, immediately getting soaked himself as the rain beat down on his left side. "You look like you could use some help," he said, and there was something warm in his voice that made Genevieve's defenses lower just slightly. "I'm fine," she said automatically, but her chattering teeth betrayed her words. "I just need to find a taxi." "Good luck with that in this weather," he said, not unkindly. "Look, there's a coffee shop right here. Why don't you come inside, dry off a little, charge your phone? You look like you're about to catch pneumonia." Genevieve hesitated. She didn't know this man. For all she knew, he could be anyone. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw nothing but genuine concern. Besides, what choice did she have? "Thank you," she said, and let him guide her toward the small coffee shop. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wall, and she realized just how cold she'd been. The shop was modest, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, nothing like the upscale cafes she usually frequented. The man grabbed a few napkins from a dispenser and handed them to her. "Here," he said. "It's not much, but it'll help." "Thank you," Genevieve said again, dabbing at her face. "I appreciate your kindness. I'm Genevieve." "Quincy Rains," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his palm slightly calloused. "Most people call me Quinn." "Well, Quinn, you probably saved me from turning into a drowned rat," she said, attempting humor despite her miserable state. "Can I buy you a coffee? It's the least I can do." He glanced at his watch, an old Timex with a scratched face, and hesitated. "I actually need to pick up my daughter from daycare in about 20 minutes, but I can't leave you stranded. Do you have someone you can call?" "My phone's dead," Genevieve admitted. "And honestly, I'm not even sure where I am. My driver dropped me at the wrong building." Quinn pulled out his own phone, a model that was at least 3 years old with a cracked screen protector. "Here, use mine. Call whoever you need." The simple generosity of the gesture made something tighten in Genevieve's chest. In her world, everything came with strings attached, with expectations and negotiations. This man was offering help with nothing expected in return. She called her assistant, Marcus, who nearly had a heart attack when he heard she was stranded. "I'll send a car immediately, Miss Lambert." "Are you safe?" "I'm fine," she assured him, glancing at Quinn, who was politely looking away to give her privacy. "I'm at." She looked around for the name of the shop. "The Cozy Corner Cafe on 5th Avenue. 20 minutes, Marcus promised. She handed the phone back to Quinn. "Thank you." "Again, my ride will be here soon." "Good," Quinn said, and he genuinely seemed relieved. "Listen, I really do need to get my daughter, but will you be okay waiting here?" "Of course," Genevieve said. "Go, don't let me make you late." He hesitated at the door, then turned back. "It was nice meeting you, Genevieve. Stay warm." And then he was gone, back into the rain, which had lessened to a steady drizzle. Genevieve sat in the coffee shop, still shivering despite the warmth, and realized she hadn't felt this affected by another person in years. There was something about Quinn Rains that had gotten under her skin in the span of 10 minutes. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes, or the way he'd put her comfort before his own without hesitation. Whatever it was, she found herself hoping she'd see him again. The company car arrived exactly 20 minutes later. Genevieve climbed in, and as they drove away, she found herself looking back at the small coffee shop, already planning to return. That night, in her penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seattle skyline, Genevieve couldn't stop thinking about Quinn Rains. She'd showered and changed into comfortable clothes, poured herself a glass of expensive wine, but her mind kept drifting back to those hazel eyes and that genuine smile. She wasn't used to this. Genevieve's dating life consisted of carefully orchestrated dinners with men from her social circle, men who saw her as either a trophy or a business opportunity. Romance had become transactional, and she'd accepted that as the price of her success. But Quinn hadn't known who she was. He'd just seen a woman in trouble and helped her. The next morning, Genevieve did something she hadn't done in years. She cleared her afternoon schedule. "Marcus, I need you to find out everything you can about the Cozy Corner Cafe on 5th Avenue, she told her assistant. Marcus raised an eyebrow but knew better than to question her. "Of course, Miss Lambert." By noon, she had the information. The cafe was owned by an elderly couple, the Hendersons, who'd run it for 30 years. It was a neighborhood fixture, known for good coffee and better hospitality. There was no mention of Quinn Rains in connection with the business, but Genevieve hadn't expected there to be. He'd been a customer like her. At 2 in the afternoon, Genevieve found herself walking into the Cozy Corner Cafe, this time in more practical shoes and a simple but elegant outfit. Mrs. Henderson, a plump woman with kind eyes and silver hair, greeted her warmly. "Welcome, dear. What can I get you?" "A latte, please," Genevieve said. "And actually, I'm hoping you might know someone, a man named Quinn Rains. He was here yesterday during the storm." Mrs. Henderson's face lit up. "Oh, Quinn, such a sweet man. He comes in here every Tuesday and Thursday morning with his little girl, Maya. She's 4, absolute angel. They usually sit at that table by the window." "Does he work nearby?" Genevieve asked, trying to sound casual. "He's a carpenter," Mrs. Henderson said. "Does beautiful work. Actually built these shelves for us." She gestured to the sturdy wooden shelves displaying local art and books. "He's had a tough time since his wife passed, but he's doing everything he can for that little girl." Genevieve felt her heart constrict. A widower, raising a daughter alone. That explained the worn clothes and the old watch. He wasn't just kind, he was struggling and still found the compassion to help a stranger in the rain. "Thank you," Genevieve said softly. She came back on Thursday morning. The cafe was busier than it had been on her previous visits, filled with the morning rush of people grabbing coffee before work. Genevieve had chosen a corner table where she could watch the door, her own coffee growing cold as she waited, feeling foolish and nervous in equal measure. Then the door opened, and Quinn walked in with a little girl's hand clasped firmly in his. Maya Rains was exactly as Mrs. Henderson had described, an angel. She had her father's hazel eyes and a tumble of dark curls, and she was chattering excitedly about something that had happened at daycare. Quinn was listening intently, nodding and responding to her story with genuine interest, and Genevieve felt something warm spread through her chest. This was a good father, the kind who made his daughter's world the center of his universe. They ordered at the counter, Maya standing on her tiptoes to see the pastry display, and Quinn lifted her up without hesitation so she could point to what she wanted. The easy intimacy of the gesture, the way Maya wrapped her arm around his neck, spoke of deep love and trust. Genevieve waited until they'd gotten their order before approaching. She was nervous, which was absurd. She'd negotiated deals worth millions without breaking a sweat, but walking up to this man made her palms damp. Quinn. He turned, and recognition flashed across his face, followed by genuine pleasure. Genevieve, hey, how are you doing? Did you get home okay the other day? Thanks to you, she said, smiling. I wanted to thank you properly, but you left before I could. Daddy, who's this? Meyer asked, looking up at Genevieve with curious eyes. This is Miss Genevieve, Quinn said, smoothing his daughter's hair. I helped her find shelter during the storm the other day. The big storm? That was scary, Maya said solemnly. We had to stay inside and I couldn't play on the swings. It was very scary, Genevieve agreed, crouching down to Maya's level. Your daddy was very brave to go out in it to help me. Maya beamed with pride. My daddy's the bravest. I can see that, Genevieve said, and when she looked up at Quinn, she saw something flicker in his eyes that made her breath catch. Would you like to join us? Quinn asked, gesturing to their table. Unless you're meeting someone. I'd love to, Genevieve said, perhaps a bit too quickly. They settled at the table by the window, and Meyer immediately launched into a story about the finger painting she'd done at daycare. Quinn listened patiently, but Genevieve caught him glancing at her, a slight smile on his face. So what brings you back to this neighborhood? Quinn asked when Maya paused to take a bite of her muffin. I'm guessing you don't usually hang out in this part of town. Genevieve felt heat rise to her cheeks. What makes you say that? Well, Quinn said, his tone teasing but not unkind, even soaking wet in the rain, I could tell that suit probably cost more than my monthly rent. And I looked you up after we met. Lambert Technologies. Pretty impressive. Genevieve's stomach dropped. You looked me up. Hey, a strange woman uses my phone. I like to know who I'm helping, Quinn said with a shrug. But it doesn't change anything. You needed help, I had an umbrella. Simple as that. Most people wouldn't see it that way, Genevieve said quietly. Most people would see an opportunity. Then you've been meeting the wrong people, Quinn said, and there was something in his voice that made Genevieve believe him absolutely. They talked for over an hour. Meyer eventually climbed into her father's lap, growing sleepy despite the morning hour, and Quinn held her easily, continuing the conversation while absently rubbing her back. Genevieve learned that he'd been a carpenter for 10 years, that he'd learned the trade from his father. His wife, Sarah, had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving him to raise Meyer alone. It's been hard, Quinn admitted, his voice low so as not to disturb Maya, who was dozing against his chest. But she's my whole world. Every decision I make is about giving her the best life I can. She's lucky to have you, Genevieve said, and she meant it with her whole heart. I'm the lucky one, Quinn said, pressing a kiss to the top of Maya's head. When they finally had to part ways, Quinn walking Maya to daycare and Genevieve heading to a late-morning meeting, they exchanged phone numbers. Real numbers this time, willingly given. Can I see you again? Genevieve asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Quinn's smile was slow and genuine. I'd really like that. Over the next few weeks, Genevieve and Quinn fell into an easy rhythm. They met for coffee when Quinn's schedule allowed, usually after he'd dropped Meyer at daycare. Their conversations ranged from deep and meaningful to silly and light, and Genevieve found herself laughing more than she had in years. Quinn never asked her for anything. He insisted on paying for his own coffee, even though Genevieve knew money was tight for him. He talked about his work with pride, showing her pictures of the furniture he'd built, the renovations he'd completed. There was dignity in his struggle, a refusal to be defined by his circumstances. 3 weeks after their first coffee date, Quinn invited her to dinner. Fair warning, he said with a grin. It's going to be at my apartment and Maya will be there. My budget doesn't really stretch to a babysitter and a nice restaurant. That sounds perfect, Genevieve said, and she meant it. Quinn's apartment was in a modest building in a working-class neighborhood. It was small but immaculately clean, with toys neatly organized in bins and children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. The furniture was mismatched, but sturdy, much of it clearly built by Quinn's own hands. Maya was excited to have a guest, showing Genevieve her room with pride. The space was clearly a labor of love. Quinn had painted a mural of a forest on one wall, complete with deer and rabbits and birds. A bookshelf overflowed with picture books, and a handmade dollhouse sat in the corner. "Daddy made everything," Maya said, spinning in a circle. "He's magic." "He certainly is," Genevieve agreed, her throat tight with emotion. Dinner was simple: spaghetti with homemade sauce, garlic bread, and a salad. But it was prepared with care, and Maya helped set the table, carefully placing napkins at each seat. "So, Miss Genevieve," Maya said importantly as they ate, "do you like my daddy?" Genevieve nearly choked on her water, and Quinn turned bright red. "Maya, that's not really an appropriate question," Quinn said gently. "But Daddy, you like her," Maya said matter-of-factly. "You smile all the time now. You didn't used to smile so much." Out of the mouths of babes, Genevieve thought. She looked at Quinn, who was studiously focused on his plate, and made a decision. "I do like your daddy," she told Maya honestly. "Very much." Quinn's head snapped up, and their eyes met across the table. The moment stretched, full of unspoken possibility. "Good," Maya said, satisfied, and went back to her spaghetti. After dinner, Maya insisted on showing Genevieve her favorite movie, an animated film about a brave princess. They all squeezed onto the couch together, Maya in the middle, and somewhere during the second act, the little girl fell asleep against Genevieve's side. Quinn carefully lifted his daughter and carried her to bed. Genevieve could hear him through the thin walls, reading a bedtime story in a soft voice, even though Maya was already asleep. When he returned, he looked tired but happy. "Sorry about the interrogation earlier," he said, sitting back down on the couch, this time closer to Genevieve. "She's at that age where she says whatever comes into her head." "She's wonderful," Genevieve said. "Quinn, this whole evening has been wonderful." "Even though it's nothing fancy?" Quinn asked, and there was vulnerability in his voice that made Genevieve's heart ache. "Especially because it's nothing fancy," Genevieve said. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. "This is real. You're real. Do you know how rare that is?" Quinn turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I know I don't have much to offer," he said quietly. "I'm not rich. I can't take you to expensive restaurants or buy you fancy things, and I come with a 4-year-old daughter who will always be my first priority." "I don't want expensive things," Genevieve said fiercely. "I have money, Quinn. What I don't have is this." She gestured around the small apartment, at the handmade furniture and the children's drawings and the lived-in warmth of a real home. "What I don't have is someone who looks at me the way you do. Like I'm a person, not a bank account or a business opportunity." Quinn was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "You're pretty amazing, you know that?" "So are you," Genevieve whispered. When Quinn kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Genevieve felt something shift inside her, like a door opening to a room she'd kept locked for too long. This was what she'd been missing. This connection, this feeling of coming home. They pulled apart slowly, and Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I'm probably crazy for doing this," he murmured. "We're from completely different worlds." "Maybe that's exactly what we both need," Genevieve said. They started dating officially after that night, though they kept things slow for Maya's sake. Genevieve understood that Quinn needed to be careful, to make sure she was going to stick around before letting his daughter get too attached. Genevieve threw herself into understanding Quinn's world. She learned about the construction business, about the challenges of being a single parent, about the constant juggling act between work and childcare. She met Quinn's friends, working-class people with big hearts who were initially suspicious of her, but gradually warmed when they saw her genuine affection for Quinn and Maya. Quinn, in turn, entered her world with a combination of awe and discomfort. She took him to a company dinner, and he wore a suit she'd bought him because he didn't own one. He was quiet during most of the evening, observing more than participating, and Genevieve could see the tension in his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said afterward as they walked to her car. "I know I wasn't exactly charming in there." "You were perfect," Genevieve said. "Quinn, I don't need you to fit into that world. I just wanted to share it with you to show you all of who I am, but I know that's not where you're comfortable." "It's not that," Quinn said, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, those people in there, they were talking about summer homes and private schools and investments, and all I could think about was how I'm trying to figure out how to afford new shoes for Maya because she's growing so fast." Genevieve stopped walking and turned to face him. "Quinn, I need you to understand something. I don't care about any of that. Yes, I have money, but money can't buy what you have. It can't buy the kind of father you are or the home you've made for Maya or the way you make me feel." "How do I make you feel?" Quinn asked softly. "Like I matter," Genevieve said. "Like I'm more than my bank account or my company. You see me, Quinn, the real me, and that's worth more than all the money in the world." Quinn pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Genevieve rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. 2 months into their relationship, Maya had a bad fall at the playground. Quinn called Genevieve in a panic, and she met them at the emergency room. The little girl had broken her arm and needed a cast, and the tears streaming down her face broke Genevieve's heart. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," Quinn said, holding Maya's good hand. "The doctor is going to fix you right up." "It hurts, Daddy," Maya sobbed. "I know, baby, I know." Genevieve watched Quinn comfort his daughter, saw the anguish in his eyes at her pain, and felt something crystallize inside her. She loved this man. She loved his daughter, and she wanted to be part of their lives forever. The hospital bill came to over $3,000 after insurance, money Quinn didn't have. Genevieve tried to help, but Quinn refused. "I appreciate it," he said, his jaw tight with pride, "but I need to take care of my daughter myself." "That's ridiculous," Genevieve said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I have the money, Quinn. Let me help." "No," Quinn said firmly. "Genevieve, I know you mean well, but I can't let you start paying for things. Where does it stop? The hospital bill today, rent tomorrow, food next week." "I won't be a charity case." "That's not what this is," Genevieve said, hurt by his words. "Isn't it?" Quinn asked, and there was pain in his eyes. "I know what people think when they see us together. Rich woman and the poor guy she's slumming with. I won't be that guy, Genevieve. I have to support my daughter on my own. Even if it means struggling unnecessarily," Genevieve asked quietly. "Even then," Quinn said, "it's about dignity. It's about being able to look myself in the mirror." They argued, their first real fight, and it ended with Quinn asking for some space to think. Genevieve went home to her empty penthouse and cried for the first time in years. She didn't know how to bridge this gap between them, didn't know how to help without making Quinn feel less than. She called her best friend, Deanna, who'd watched this relationship develop with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "He's proud," Deanna said simply. "And honestly, Jen, can you blame him? You're worth hundreds of millions. He probably feels like he can't compete." "But he doesn't have to compete," Genevieve said miserably. "I don't care about money when it comes to us." "You don't," Deanna agreed. "But he does. His identity as a man, as a provider for his daughter, it's wrapped up in his ability to take care of things himself. You throwing money at problems, even with the best intentions, threatens that. So what do I do?" Genevieve asked. "You show him that you love him for who he is, not despite his circumstances," Deanna said. "And you respect his pride, even when it seems foolish to you." Genevieve thought about that conversation for days. She gave Quinn the space he'd asked for, even though it killed her. A week passed, then 2, and she was starting to think she'd lost him for good. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, there was a knock on her office door. Quinn stood there, looking uncomfortable in his work clothes, covered in sawdust. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Genevieve said, her heart in her throat. "Can we talk?" They sat in her office, this space that represented everything about her world. Quinn looked around at the expensive furniture, the view of the city, the awards on the walls. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "And I realized something. I was so worried about my pride, about being able to provide, that I was pushing away the best thing that's happened to me in years." "Quinn, let me finish," he said gently. "I don't know how to navigate this, Genevieve. The money thing, our different worlds, but I know that I love you, and Maya loves you, and I don't want to lose you because I'm too stubborn to figure it out." Genevieve's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, so much, and I'm sorry if I made you feel like your pride didn't matter. That wasn't my intention." "I know," Quinn said. "And I'm sorry for making you feel like your help wasn't wanted. Maybe we can find a middle ground. You respect my need to provide for my daughter, and I'll try not to be so stubborn that I push you away." "That sounds like a good compromise," Genevieve said, laughing through her tears. Quinn crossed the office and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her knees weak. When they broke apart, he was smiling. "Maya's been asking about you constantly," he said. "She wants to know when Miss Genevieve is coming back." "Tell her soon," Genevieve promised. "Tell her very soon." Over the following months, they found their rhythm. Genevieve learned to step back and let Quinn handle things his way, only offering help when explicitly asked. Quinn learned to accept small gestures, like when Genevieve brought groceries or took them all out for ice cream. It wasn't about money, it was about caring for the people she loved. Maya thrived with Genevieve in her life. The little girl had been hesitant at first, protective of her father and confused by this new woman's presence. But Genevieve had been patient, letting Maya set the pace. She showed up to Maya's preschool recital, helped Quinn build a treehouse in their apartment building's shared yard, and learned to braid hair by watching countless YouTube videos. 6 months into their relationship, Genevieve met Quinn's parents. Edward and Ruth Rains were salt-of-the-earth people who'd raised 4 children on modest means and were fiercely proud of their carpenter son. They were initially wary of Genevieve, concerned about her intentions toward Quinn and Maya. "Our boy's been through enough," Ruth said bluntly over dinner at their home. "Sarah's death nearly broke him. He's rebuilt his life for that little girl, and we won't stand by and watch him get hurt again." "I understand your concern," Genevieve said respectfully. "And I can't promise that we'll never face challenges. But I can promise that I love Quinn and Maya with all my heart. I'm not going anywhere." Edward studied her with sharp eyes. "You come from money. You're used to getting what you want when you want it. What happens when being with a carpenter and playing stepmom gets boring?" The words stung, but Genevieve understood where they came from. "I've spent my entire adult life in a world where everything is transactional," she said quietly, "where people see me as a means to an end. Quinn is the first person in years who's seen me as just Genevieve, not the CEO, not the millionaire, just me. That's not something that gets boring. That's something you treasure." There was a long silence. Then Ruth reached across the table and patted Genevieve's hand. "You'll do," she said with a small smile. Maya broke the tension by running into the room, excited to show her grandparents a drawing she'd made. It was a picture of 4 stick figures holding hands: Quinn, Maya, Genevieve, and a dog. "That's our family," Maya announced proudly. "And that's the dog we're going to get." Quinn caught Genevieve's eye over his daughter's head, and the look of love and hope on his face made her heart soar. That night, as they drove back to Quinn's apartment, Maya asleep in her car seat, Quinn reached over and took Genevieve's hand. "Thank you for being so patient with my parents," he said. "They mean well." "They love you," Genevieve said. "I get it. I'd be protective too." "Maya called you family today," Quinn said softly. "I heard," Genevieve said, her throat tight with emotion. "Is that okay?" "I mean, we haven't really talked about where this is going, about the future." Genevieve squeezed his hand. "It's more than okay, Quinn. It's everything." They talked about the future that night after Maya was in bed. They talked about what a life together might look like, about the challenges they'd face, about their hopes and dreams. Quinn admitted he was scared of not being enough for Genevieve, of her eventually realizing she could do better. Genevieve admitted she was scared of Maya never fully accepting her, of always being the outsider in their tight-knit unit. "You're not an outsider," Quinn said firmly. "You're already part of us, Genevieve. Maya lights up when you walk in the room, and me, I'm happier than I've been in years. You brought color back into a world that had gone gray." "You did the same for me," Genevieve said. "I was so focused on work, on success, that I forgot what it felt like to really live. You and Maya reminded me." A year into their relationship, Quinn surprised Genevieve by asking her to move in with them. She'd been spending most nights at his apartment anyway, keeping clothes in his closet and toiletries in his bathroom. "I know my place is small," Quinn said, nervous as he made the offer. "And I know you're used to much nicer things, but I want us to be a family, a real family. You, me, and Maya." Genevieve looked around the small apartment that had become more of a home than her luxurious penthouse ever was. "On one condition," she said. Quinn's face fell. "What?" "We find a bigger place. Not a mansion," she added quickly, seeing his expression. "But something with enough room for all of us, including a proper workshop for your carpentry. I'll pay for it, and before you argue, consider it an investment in our future, in your business." "You're so talented, Quinn, but you're limited by space and equipment. Let me help you reach your potential." Quinn was quiet for a long moment. "I don't want your money to change us," he said finally. "It won't," Genevieve promised. "We'll set boundaries, but Quinn, we're building a life together. Let's build one that works for all of us." They found a house in a family-friendly neighborhood, a modest 4-bedroom with a detached garage that could be converted into a workshop. It wasn't fancy by Genevieve's standards, but it was perfect for their needs. Maya would have her own room, plus a playroom. Quinn would have his workshop. And they'd have a yard where they could plant a garden and get the dog Maya had been begging for. Moving day was chaotic and wonderful. Quinn's brothers came to help, and they teased him mercilessly about moving in with his rich girlfriend. But there was no malice in it, and by the end of the day, everyone was laughing and sharing pizza in the new house. Maya ran from room to room, excited beyond measure. When she saw her new bedroom, which Genevieve and Quinn had painted together in soft purple with white clouds on the ceiling, she burst into tears of joy. "This is the best room ever," she declared, hugging them both. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Genevieve." That night, after Maya was asleep in her new room, Quinn and Genevieve stood in their own room, surrounded by unpacked boxes, and just held each other. "This is really happening," Quinn said with wonder. "We're really doing this." "We really are," Genevieve agreed. "No regrets." "Not a single one," Quinn said, and kissed her deeply. Life settled into a new normal. Quinn's carpentry business flourished with the new workshop space. Word spread about his craftsmanship, and he started getting bigger, more lucrative jobs. He was able to hire an assistant, a young man fresh out of trade school who was eager to learn. For the first time in years, Quinn wasn't constantly worried about money. Genevieve scaled back her hours at Lambert Technologies, promoting her second-in-command to co-CEO and focusing more on strategic vision than day-to-day operations. It meant more time for family dinners, for helping with homework, for the ordinary moments that made up a life. Maya started kindergarten, and both Quinn and Genevieve took her on her first day. The little girl was nervous but excited, wearing a new backpack and the light-up shoes she'd picked out herself. When she turned to wave at them from the classroom door, Genevieve felt tears sting her eyes. "Our baby's growing up," she said, and the words felt natural, right? Maya was their baby, even if Genevieve hadn't given birth to her. Quinn wrapped an arm around her waist. "I was thinking," he said casually, though his voice had a nervous edge. "Maya's going to be in school full days now. The house is going to seem pretty quiet." "It will," Genevieve agreed, not sure where he was going with this. "What would you think about making it a little less quiet?" Quinn asked. "Maybe in about 9 months or so." Genevieve's heart stopped. She turned to look at him, seeing the hope and fear in his eyes. "Quinn, are you asking?" "I want more kids with you," Quinn said, the words coming out in a rush. "I want Maya to have siblings. I want us to have a baby together, but only if you want that too. I know it's a big step, and you've already taken on so much with Maya and me. Yes, Genevieve said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, I want that, so much. They tried for a baby, and 3 months later, Genevieve saw 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. She told Quinn that night, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. They told Maya together, explaining that she was going to be a big sister. Maya's reaction was everything they could have hoped for. A baby, she squealed. For real. I can teach them things and help take care of them. Absolutely, Quinn said, grinning. You're going to be the best big sister ever. The pregnancy was healthy and uncomplicated. Quinn was attentive to the point of being overprotective, always making sure Genevieve was comfortable, had what she needed. Maya talked to Genevieve's growing belly every night, telling her future sibling about her day. One evening, about 6 months into the pregnancy, Quinn found Genevieve in the nursery they were preparing. She was standing in front of the window, one hand on her belly, watching the sunset. Hey, he said softly. You okay? More than okay, Genevieve said. I was just thinking about how much my life has changed. 2 years ago, I was alone in a penthouse, wondering if success was all there was. And now I'm here in this perfect house with you and Meyer and this little one on the way. It's like a dream. Quinn came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her and resting his hands over hers on her belly. It's not a dream, he said. It's our life, the one we built together. I love you, Genevieve said, leaning back against him. I love you so much. I love you too, Quinn said. And I have something to ask you. Genevieve felt him shift, and when she turned around, Quinn was on one knee, holding a small velvet box. Genevieve Lambert, he said, his voice thick with emotion, you are the most incredible woman I've ever known. You came into my life like a storm, turned everything upside down in the best possible way. You love my daughter like she's your own. You see me, the real me, and love me anyway. Will you marry me? The ring in the box was simple but beautiful, a single diamond on a delicate band. It wasn't showy or ostentatious, and it was perfect. Yes, Genevieve said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Quinn slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that was full of love and promise and the future they were building together. They heard a squeal from the doorway and turned to see Maya standing there in her pajamas, bouncing with excitement. Daddy asked you to marry him, she said, her eyes huge. So you're going to be my real mom. Genevieve crouched down, or as much as her pregnant belly would allow. I'm already your real mom, sweetheart, she said gently. But yes, your daddy and I are getting married. Is that okay with you? Maya launched herself at Genevieve, hugging her carefully. It's super okay. Can I be in the wedding? Please, 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 Quinn laughed, joining the hug. Of course you can be in the wedding. You're the most important person there. They planned a small wedding for after the baby was born. Neither wanted anything elaborate, just their closest family and friends witnessing them commit to the life they were already living. Their son was born on a sunny morning in May. James Edward Rains came into the world with a powerful cry and a head of dark hair. Quinn was in the delivery room, holding Genevieve's hand, and when he first held his son, tears streamed down his face. He's perfect, Quinn whispered. You're perfect. I can't believe this is my life. Maya met her brother that afternoon and was instantly smitten. She held him carefully, with supervision, and declared him the best baby in the whole world. I'm going to teach him everything, she announced solemnly. How to ride a bike and read books and build things like Daddy. I'm sure you will, baby, Genevieve said, exhausted but happier than she'd ever been. They brought James home 2 days later, and life became a beautiful chaos of feedings and diaper changes and a 6-year-old helper who wanted to be involved in everything. Quinn took time off from work to be home during those first crucial weeks, and Genevieve fell even more in love watching him parent. He was so gentle with their tiny son, so patient with Maya when she got frustrated that the baby couldn't play with her yet. He took night feedings without complaint, changed diapers, and still found time to make Genevieve feel loved and supported. 3 months after James was born, they got married in their backyard. It was a simple ceremony with about 50 guests, mostly family and close friends. Maya was the flower girl, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, and James slept through the entire ceremony in his grandmother Ruth's arms. Genevieve wore a simple white dress, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd once imagined for her wedding day. Quinn wore a suit he'd actually bought himself this time, and when she walked down the makeshift aisle toward him, the look in his eyes took her breath away. They'd written their own vows. Quinn went first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Genevieve, you came into my life when I'd forgotten how to hope for anything beyond just getting through each day. You showed me that it was okay to want more, to dream bigger. You loved my daughter without hesitation, and you gave me a son. You're my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. I promise to spend every day earning the gift of your love. I promise to support your dreams as fiercely as you support mine. I promise to be honest, faithful, and present. From this day forward, you'll never face a storm alone because I'll always share my umbrella with you." By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Genevieve took a shaky breath and began her own vows. "Quinn, 2 years ago I was lost in a rainstorm, and you were my shelter. But you became so much more than that. You showed me what real strength looks like. It's not in bank accounts or business deals. It's in a father who works himself to exhaustion to provide for his daughter. It's in a man who isn't afraid to be vulnerable, to admit when he's struggling. You taught me what love really means. It's not grand gestures or expensive gifts. It's showing up, day after day, choosing each other over and over. I promise to honor your strength and support you in your struggles. I promise to love Maya and James and any future children we have with every fiber of my being. I promise to never let money come between us, to always see you for the incredible man you are. I choose you, Quinn Rains, today and every day for the rest of my life." They exchanged rings, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with a tenderness that made Genevieve's knees weak. The reception was held in the same backyard, with catering from the Cozy Corner Cafe and a small band playing music. Everyone danced and laughed and celebrated the union of these two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. Late in the evening, as the party wound down and James was being put to bed by his grandparents, Genevieve and Quinn snuck away for a quiet moment. They stood under the stars in their own backyard, swaying to music only they could hear. "Mrs. Rains," Quinn said, trying out the name. "How does it feel?" "Perfect," Genevieve said. "Everything about this is perfect. Even the parts where I'm stubborn and proud," Quinn teased. "Especially those parts," Genevieve said. "They're part of who you are, and I love all of you." "I love all of you too," Quinn said. "Every brilliant, generous, beautiful part." They kissed under the stars, and Genevieve thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a rainy street corner to this moment, married with children and a life full of love. It hadn't always been easy. They'd fought and struggled and had to learn how to bridge the gaps between their different worlds, but they'd done it together, and that made all the difference. Life continued in its beautiful, messy way. Maya thrived in school, showing an aptitude for art that Quinn encouraged by setting up a small studio space for her in his workshop. James grew from an infant to a toddler, his personality emerging as sunny and easygoing. Quinn's carpentry business continued to grow, and he eventually moved into a larger commercial space, hiring 3 more employees. Genevieve sold Lambert Technologies 2 years after getting married. She'd built it from nothing, had poured her heart and soul into it for over a decade, but it was time for a new chapter. She negotiated a sale that made her even wealthier than she'd been, but more importantly, it gave her time. Time to be present for her family, to pursue new interests, to simply live. She started a foundation focused on supporting single parents, providing resources for childcare, job training, and emergency financial assistance. It was her way of giving back, of helping others who were struggling the way Quinn had struggled before they met. Quinn was her partner in the foundation, bringing the perspective of someone who'd lived that life. They worked together to make a real difference, and it became a shared passion that strengthened their bond even further. When Maya turned 10, she asked if she could start calling Genevieve Mom instead of using her first name. They'd never pushed it, had let Maya come to it in her own time, but the question still made Genevieve cry. "Are you sure?" Genevieve asked, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't want you to feel like you're replacing your first mom." Maya, wise beyond her years, took Genevieve's hand. "I'm not replacing her," she said. "She'll always be my mom, but you're my mom too. You're the one who braids my hair and helps with homework and comes to all my art shows. You're my mom because you choose to be every day." "Then yes," Genevieve said, pulling Maya into a tight hug. "I would be honored for you to call me Mom." From that day forward, Maya had two moms. Sarah, who'd given her life and loved her for her first 2 years, and Genevieve, who'd chosen her and loved her every day since. When James was 3, they decided to have another child. Their daughter, Lily Grace, was born on a snowy December morning, arriving 3 weeks early and impatient to meet the world. She had Genevieve's blonde hair and Quinn's hazel eyes, and her siblings were instantly devoted to her. Maya, now 11, was an expert big sister, helping with feeding and diaper changes and entertaining the baby with funny faces. James, at 3, was less helpful but equally loving, bringing Lily his favorite stuffed animals to keep her company. Their house was full and loud and chaotic, and Genevieve had never been happier. One evening, when Lily was about 6 months old, Genevieve found Quinn in his workshop. He was building a rocking horse for their daughter, carefully sanding the wood smooth. "That's beautiful," Genevieve said, watching his skilled hands work. "It's for our girl," Quinn said, looking up with a smile. "I made one for Maya, though I don't know if you ever saw it. It got lost in the move after Sarah died. I wanted to make sure Lily had one too." Genevieve came to stand beside him, running her hand over the smooth wood. "You're an amazing father, Quinn, and an amazing husband. I hope you know that." Quinn set down his tools and pulled her close. "I'm just doing my best, but it's easy when I have you beside me." "Do you ever think about that day?" Genevieve asked. "The day we met, the storm—" "All the time," Quinn admitted. "I almost didn't stop that day. I was running late to pick up Maya, and I was stressed about money and life in general. But something made me look up, and I saw you standing there in the rain, looking so lost. I couldn't just walk by." "I'm so glad you didn't," Genevieve said. "That moment changed everything." "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life," Quinn said quietly. "That I get to wake up next to you every morning, that we have 3 incredible kids, that I don't have to worry about making ends meet or whether I can afford to fix the car or buy groceries. It still doesn't feel real sometimes." "It's real," Genevieve assured him. "We're real." "And we built this together, Quinn. Yes, I had money, but you brought so much more. You brought love and integrity and strength. You taught me what really matters." "We taught each other," Quinn said, kissing her forehead. "You taught me that it's okay to accept help, that my worth isn't measured by my bank account. You showed me that I deserved good things, that Maya deserved a mother who loved her fiercely. You gave us both so much." They stood together in the workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and the evidence of Quinn's craft, and Genevieve felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what happiness looked like. Not the empty success she'd once chased, but this full, messy, beautiful life with the man she loved and the family they'd built together. Years passed in the way they do when life is good. Maya grew into a talented artist, eventually attending a prestigious art school with scholarship support from her mother's foundation. James developed his father's love of building things, spending hours in the workshop learning carpentry. Lily was their wild child, fearless and full of laughter, keeping them all on their toes. Quinn's business became one of the most respected carpentry firms in the city. He never forgot where he came from, though. and he made a point of hiring people who needed a second chance, single parents and people coming out of difficult circumstances. He paid fair wages and offered benefits, determined to be the kind of employer he'd wished for during his own struggles. Genevieve's foundation grew and expanded, helping thousands of families across the state. She and Quinn were hands-on, not just writing checks but actually showing up, meeting the families they helped, listening to their stories. It kept them grounded, reminded them of how far they'd come and how lucky they were. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Genevieve with a trip to Paris, just the two of them. It was the first time they'd been away from the kids for more than a day or two, and while they missed them terribly, it was also wonderful to reconnect as just Quinn and Genevieve, not Mom and Dad. They walked along the Seine, visited the Louvre, ate in small cafes that Quinn researched carefully to fit their budget, even though Genevieve insisted money was no object. He still had that pride, that need to contribute equally, and Genevieve loved him for it, even when it exasperated her. On their last night in Paris, over dinner in a restaurant overlooking the Eiffel Tower, Quinn took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said, "about how we met, about that storm and that moment when I decided to share my umbrella." "Best decision you ever made," Genevieve teased. "Second best," Quinn corrected with a grin. "Best decision was asking you to marry me, but that first moment, offering you shelter, it taught me something. The best things in life often start with a simple act of kindness, with choosing to help someone even when it's inconvenient." "You've certainly lived that philosophy," Genevieve said. "The way you hire people who need a chance, the way you volunteer with the foundation, the way you parent our kids. You lead with kindness, Quinn. It's one of the things I love most about you." "We lead with kindness," Quinn corrected. "You're the most generous person I know, Jen, and not just with money. You give your time, your attention, your heart. You made space in your life for me and Maya when you could have had anyone. You didn't see a struggling single dad. You saw me." "I saw the man I was meant to spend my life with," Genevieve said simply. "And I was right." They clinked glasses, toasting to 10 years of marriage and the many more to come. Back home, life continued its rhythm. Maya graduated from art school and landed a job at a prestigious gallery. She'd grown into a confident, compassionate young woman, and watching her thrive filled both Quinn and Genevieve with pride. She brought home a boyfriend eventually, a kind young man named Thomas, who Quinn grilled mercilessly before giving his grudging approval. "You were never that overprotective with me," Genevieve complained, laughing. "That's because I didn't meet you until you were already grown," Quinn said. "And I wasn't your father. Maya's my baby girl. I'm allowed to be overprotective." James, at 14, was going through the awkward teenage years, but remained a good kid at heart. He and Quinn were building a boat together in the workshop, a project that would take years, but gave them countless hours of quality time together. Lily, at 11, was discovering her own passions. She loved science, conducting elaborate experiments that sometimes went awry and required professional cleaning services. She reminded Genevieve of herself at that age, curious and driven and unafraid to ask questions. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, not unlike the day they'd met, Quinn and Genevieve found themselves alone in the house. The kids were all at various activities, and they'd decided to have a quiet afternoon at home. They were in the living room, Genevieve reading while Quinn worked on a crossword puzzle, when the sound of thunder rumbled through the house. "Storm's getting bad," Quinn observed, looking out the window at the rain. "Remember the first time we were together in a storm?" Genevieve asked, setting down her book. "How could I forget?" Quinn said, coming to sit beside her on the couch. "Changed my whole life." "Mine too," Genevieve said, curling into his side. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day, if you'd just walked by." "I wouldn't have," Quinn said with certainty. "Even if I'd never seen you again, I still would have stopped. That's just who I am. But I'm glad I did because it brought me here to this life with you." "I love you, Quinn Rains," Genevieve said, tilting her face up for a kiss. I love you too, Genevieve Rains, Quinn murmured against her lips. More than I ever thought possible. They sat together as the storm raged outside, safe and warm in the home they'd built, surrounded by evidence of the life they'd created. Photos on the walls chronicling their journey from that first meeting to this moment. Maya's artwork, James's school projects, Lily's science fair trophies. A family, real and whole and full of love. The rain hammered against the windows, but inside, everything was perfect. 2 years later, Maya got married to Thomas in a beautiful ceremony that had Genevieve crying from start to finish. Watching her daughter, the girl she'd chosen to love all those years ago, walk down the aisle in her grandmother Sarah's wedding dress was one of the most emotional moments of Genevieve's life. Quinn walked Maya down the aisle, his eyes wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. When the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married, Quinn said, "Her mother and I do," and squeezed Genevieve's hand. A year after that, they became grandparents when Maya and Thomas welcomed a daughter of their own. Holding that tiny baby, seeing the continuation of their family, Genevieve was overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought them all here. James graduated high school and chose to attend trade school, wanting to follow in his father's footsteps. Quinn couldn't have been prouder. They talked about James eventually joining the business, maybe taking it over someday, and those conversations filled Quinn with a sense of legacy and purpose. Lily, brilliant and driven, was looking at prestigious universities with programs in biomedical engineering. She had her mother's ambition and her father's work ethic, and there was no doubt she'd achieve whatever she set her mind to. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinn and Genevieve renewed their vows in the same backyard where they'd married. Their children and grandchildren were there, along with friends and family who'd been part of their journey. They stood under an arbor that Quinn had built himself, holding hands as they'd done 20 years before. 20 years ago, Quinn said, his voice strong and sure, "I promised to share my umbrella with you forever, to be your shelter in every storm. I've kept that promise and I'll keep making it every day for the rest of my life. You are my heart, Genevieve. My partner, my best friend, the love of my life. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing us, for building this beautiful life with me." Genevieve smiled through her tears. 20 years ago, I was lost, and you found me. You showed me what love really means. It's not about grand gestures or money or status. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other day after day, through joy and struggle, through the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. You've been my constant, Quinn, my rock, my home. I love you more today than I did 20 years ago, and I'll love you even more 20 years from now. They kissed as their family applauded, and when they pulled apart, Genevieve saw Maya wiping her eyes, James grinning proudly, and Lily rolling her eyes in the way only a teenager could while still smiling. That evening, after the party had ended and the guests had gone home, Quinn and Genevieve sat on their back porch, watching the stars come out. "Can you believe it's been 20 years?" Genevieve asked, her head on Quinn's shoulder. "Some days it feels like forever in the best way," Quinn said. "Like I can't remember a time before you. Other days, it feels like just yesterday I was that struggling single dad, terrified of everything." "You were never just a struggling single dad," Genevieve said firmly. "You were always a good man doing his best. That's what I saw that day in the rain. That's what I fell in love with." "I still think about that day," Quinn admitted. "How different things could have been. If I'd been 5 minutes later, or if you'd already found a cab, or if I'd been too shy to approach you. So many little moments that had to line up perfectly." "Fate," Genevieve said simply. "We were meant to find each other." "Yeah," Quinn agreed, pulling her closer. "We were." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, feeling the warmth of 20 years of love and partnership and family. Inside, they could hear Lily laughing at something on her phone, the sounds of home and life and everything good. "You know what the best part is?" Quinn asked after a while. "What's that?" "We get to do this for the rest of our lives," Quinn said. Wake up together, face whatever comes, go to bed knowing we're not alone. I get to love you every day for as long as we both shall live." "That is the best part," Genevieve agreed, her heart full to bursting. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the promise of another storm on the horizon. But they weren't worried. They'd weathered every storm life had thrown at them, always together, always sheltering each other. Whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. As partners, as lovers, as best friends who'd chosen each other in a rainstorm 22 years ago and kept choosing each other every day since. Quinn stood and extended his hand to Genevieve. "Dance with me." "There's no music," Genevieve said, but she took his hand anyway. "We don't need music," Quinn said, pulling her close and swaying gently. "We never have." They danced on the back porch as the first drops of rain began to fall. Two people who'd found each other in a storm and built a love that weathered every season. Their journey had started with a simple umbrella shared between strangers, and it had become this beautiful, complex, perfect life full of love and family and endless possibility. As the rain picked up, they finally went inside, laughing and soaked despite the porch roof. Quinn grabbed a towel and dried Genevieve's hair, a gesture so tender and familiar it made her heart ache with love. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For stopping that day, for sharing your umbrella, for choosing us every day, for being you." Quinn cupped her face in his hands, his eyes full of love and warmth and the intimacy of 2 decades together. "Thank you for seeing me, for loving Maya like your own, for giving us this beautiful family, for being my home." They kissed, a soft, sweet kiss that held 20 years of love and the promise of all the years to come. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, surrounded by everything they'd built together, Quinn and Genevieve Rains were exactly where they belonged. Home with each other forever. Their love story had started with rain and an umbrella and a moment of kindness. It had grown through challenges and triumphs, through the mundane and the magnificent, through every season of life. And it would continue, strong and true, for all the days they had left. Because real love, the kind that lasts, isn't built on grand gestures or perfect moments. It's built on choice, on showing up, on offering shelter to someone in a storm, and then choosing to walk beside them through every storm that follows. Quinn had offered Genevieve his umbrella on a rainy street corner 22 years ago. In return, she'd given him her heart, her loyalty, her love. Together, they'd built something neither could have imagined alone: a family, a life, a love story for the ages. And as they settled in for the night, checking on their sleeping daughter, looking at photos of their older children, planning for the grandchildren and the future and all the beautiful ordinariness of life, they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would do it all again, exactly the same way, because it had led them here, to each other, to this love, to home, and that, more than money or success or anything else, was the greatest treasure of all.